the way this policy reads, in all the steps Andy talks, I mean, this would take potentially years. I mean, if there wasn't a gubernatorial or a presidential election, and then there's 4 weeks of public input after that, there's 4 weeks of a community thing before that, and then, oh, by the way, step one of even just putting it on a board agenda, we actually have policies that talk about how our board agendas are put together, and whoever the president is at the time could say, I'm not putting that on the agenda. And then there's a whole nother process in place for board members to say, I want you to put a certain topic on an agenda. So I think it's time we look at this policy. I'm not saying we totally eliminate it. I'm not saying that we, maybe not necessarily start from scratch, but I think it's time we start looking at this policy just in case in the future, the declining enrollment numbers, back then they were talking about we could have the largest high school in the state of Wisconsin. Well, now we're talking about having 2 very small high schools in West Bend. And then even if you were to combine them, they'd be an average size high school in West Bend. So I think the point of this discussion, if I remember our discussion beforehand, right, was let's talk about it a little bit tonight. And we have to talk about this as it relates to our facilities and our budget, otherwise we will be off topic. But is this something we want the policy committee to start thinking about and talking about? And of course, our policy meetings are open to all of our board members to come and voice opinions and ideas. But it would be easier for us to close an elementary school than it would be to combine the 2 high schools. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just eye-opening. I'm not saying it's wrong, right or wrong. I'm just saying it's eye-opening. We could vote, we could put in a topic on an agenda for our next board meeting that we're gonna have a vote, an action item on what to do with the ESC, or what to do with, whatever. But this could be years before it actually, not just happens, but before a decision is made to have it happen. So I'll stop there, and I want to get kind of your thoughts, but let's make sure we keep this in, as it relates to our facilities and our budgets and things. We're not here to talk about whether or not we should combine the high school. I guess what I'm asking is it okay to start looking at this policy?
So I'd be in favor of looking at the policy for all the reasons that you mentioned, but also I look at it several ways. If you look at the very introductory section of the policy, which I think is on slide 33 there, I think in the wisdom of prior boards, and I can understand why, when you look at it, it says the following process shall be enforced to ensure all stakeholders are involved in the process. And I think there are many ways to involve stakeholders in the process. And that's really, it sounds like what the main goal of this was. But the second part is back to your discussion around budget and such. Because of the gubernatorial presidential timing, there's really a 2-year blackout period between that. If interest rates went down to 0, well, it falls within the 2 years. We might not be able to take advantage of that. And again, it shouldn't just all be about money, but to handicap ourselves like that, to say it's not even an option, seems extreme. So I think it's worthy of at least examining it. To that end, though, I would say that the prior boards, I understand at that time, I think you're right, there was a lot of very interesting discussion and a lot of passion, so I can understand the intent. But I think we need to balance that with, well, what are current circumstances, and what do we want to be sure that we give ourselves the flexibility and options to do. So I'm supportive of a review of it.
There's $45 million worth of work that Dave showed us at the high school. And I just think we would be so remiss not to think about, if we were to get $45 million and talk about paint, Dave mentioned paint. Well, do we start painting everything blue and maroon again? Or do we start talking about maybe it's time we combine the high schools, and maybe that becomes part of a referendum question. We want to borrow $45 million, and then a separate advisory question could be, do you want us to combine the high schools? And if the vote is yes and yes, well, we've got our answer.
I agree. I would like the policy to be reviewed. I don't think we need to decide right now or even in the near future about combining the schools, but if we're gonna spend a lot of money, I would like to consider seeing it spent in such a way that, say, 10 years from now, we don't have to redo things. I mean, we can
We'll
still.
go for gray.
Yeah, we can.
Just like these walls.
We can prepare for the future without combining it right away. So,
And I think it's important that we look at what the financial implications are, because are you gonna get rid of, go to one AD for that amount of students? Probably not, it's an AD and an assistant. What other administration are we gonna consolidate and save? Maybe a head or two? I came out in 2015 as a very passionate supporter of the two high schools, because it gives twice as many kids the option of participating in sports. Now, if enrollment continues to decline, we're seeing more and more co-op teams, that's one thing, but I think we also need to consult Aaron and Kevin to find out how quickly can we tell WIAA that one of our schools no longer exists, and they need to, factor that into scheduling and so forth. So I don't disagree with reviewing the policy, but I think having a 2-year window to respond, WIA may say we can't work with anything less than that either.
So just a couple real quick comments on that is that if you look at the policy, even if you change the policy and you had all the input and you made the decision, once that decision has been made, you're only gonna do it for a couple reasons. One is finances and the other is enrollment. And so, and I don't have a crystal ball on either one, but our enrollment numbers, unless something changes, will be down to 1,600 kids between east and west, and not too far down the road, okay? So is that still a lot of kids? Yeah, it is. But is it an unbelievably large high school? Probably not. But no matter what you do, even if you chose to do something, you're gonna choose to do something for 3 years down the road, or 2 years down the road. If that decision was gonna be made that we really wanna look at one high school, and we go through all the work to do that, and you had public input and support for that, you're still gonna make a decision for 2 or 3 years down the road. You're not saying, well, senior class, you're no longer a senior, you're no longer Spartan, you're a son, or vice versa. You maybe look at it, the current high school goes up, and as the high school, the freshmen graduate, by that time, that's all ifs and whats, but no matter what you do, to Paul's comment, is that it truly is gonna be a lengthy process. It's not one that you jump into, because it's a huge decision. We've been West Bend, East and West for 50 years, and we like that heritage, and so it's not something that you throw out just on a whim, but you truly have to look at all of the different financial as well as enrollment data when that happens.
So as you're looking for comments, I was at the meeting, I think it was in 2015. I'm just generalizing, but there was roughly 200 people there. It was a heavily interested community meeting. It was in Badger, so it was a much bigger venue than this, and it was packed, and I'd say 80 to 90% of the people, probably 50 people spoke, 80 to 90% of the people were in favor of 2 high schools. I think one of the reasons why the board policy was unanimous in the decision was the overwhelming community support over 2 high schools at the time. So I'm just shedding lights from being there at that school board meeting and just seeing how people reacted and voted. They did do some minimal, I don't think some extensive cost estimates. There was some minimal cost estimates done, but with sharing of teachers, we're in one high school already. You're sharing teachers, everyone goes to high school and shares teachers between East and West. Yes, it's the sports teams, and it's, yes, some administration and others. There's not a significant financial savings, but on the other hand, there is with, if you're talking 600-700 less kids in the high school, that's another topic. So, but those are